So first up, we have the experiences of racism and its impacts on mental well-being in Black, Asian and minority ethnic people working and studying in the UK veterinary sector. So we have Dr. Victoria Crossley and Dr. Navaratnam Partheeban, who will both be presenting here. Victoria graduated from the University of Edinburgh in 2009 and worked for 4 years in small animal practice before taking up the post of Pfizer Feline Fellow at the University of Bristol. In 2014, she undertook a PhD investigating the etiology of feline hypothyroidism at the Royal Veterinary College, where she subsequently worked as impact case manager while teaching and tutoring on the BVet Med course. Victoria is currently teaching fellow and research in research impact and cornerstone at Imperial College of London. Steve is a farm vet. He is dedicated to working in working to support the sector and helping attract people from non-traditional backgrounds. This has included being a trustee of City Farm and the Country Trust. He is also a founding member of the BIPOC Working Group, member at the Land Workers Alliance. He was awarded an Oxford Farming Conference Emerging Leader Award in 2020. As a Nuffield Farming Scholar in 2021, he is completing his project on promoting and supporting ethnic minorities in the agricultural, farming and veterinary sector. Thank you both for sharing this talk.
Okay, so as long as the slides are working, today Phoebe and I are going to present a selection of the qualitative findings from our team's project investigating experiences of racism and its impact on mental well-being in Black, Asian and minority ethnic people working or studying in the UK veterinary sector. So lack of diversity is a considerable issue in the UK veterinary profession. Although approximately 16% of the UK general population are Black, Asian or minority ethnic, only about 3.5% of vets and 2% of veterinary nurses are from minority ethnic groups. Discrimination in the veterinary profession has previously been highlighted as a problem by the British Veterinary Association. And in 2019, their discrimination survey showed that over a quarter of BAME respondents had experienced discrimination in the previous 12 months. And over half of the respondents experiencing racial discrimination stated that incidents hadn't been dealt with satisfactorily. And students were also less likely to report incidents, with less than 1 in 5 incidents of any type of discrimination being reported by students. There's also lack of awareness of the problem in the veterinary profession, with around half of vets surveyed by the BVA reporting not being very concerned about diversity, and slightly less than half reporting not being very concerned about discrimination in the profession. And barriers to inclusivity are really important for us to understand, because it's beneficial to attract and keep a diverse profession, which has been shown to improve both performance and productivity in the workplace. As we've already heard in the previous talk, high levels of anxiety and depression are known to affect UK vets, with mortality rates for suicide being about 3 to 4 times that of the general population, and about twice that of other high-risk medical occupations such as medicine and dentistry. Multiple studies that aren't specific to the veterinary sector have showed that there's clear evidence of strong association between experiences of racism and negative mental health and well-being. And this includes harm from microaggressions, which are subtle forms of bias and discrimination experienced by members of marginalised groups. However, despite all of this, there's been very little research investigating the impact of racism in the veterinary sector to date. So the aim of our research is to better understand experiences of racism and its effects on mental well-being in BAME people working or studying in the UK veterinary sector. And in addition to investigating experiences of overt or more extreme incidents, we wanted to particularly understand experiences of what is referred to as everyday racism, which are the recurrent systemic and familiar practices in society, which either intentionally or unintentionally convey disregard, disrespect, or marginality. So the objectives of our project were to describe BAME individuals' experiences of racism whilst working or studying in the UK veterinary sector, to describe the impact that these experiences have had on their mental well-being and job satisfaction, to determine what BAME individuals think could or should be done to tackle racism in the sector, and to highlight issues for consideration in the design and implementation of appropriate interventions. So to achieve this, we designed an anonymous online questionnaire that was disseminated widely throughout the veterinary sector between January and March of this year. We had really kind assistance with this from a very large number of organisations, only some of which I've managed to show here, and also included organisations such as the large veterinary corporates and charities such as the PDSA. This survey was open to minority ethnic people that are working or studying in the veterinary sector in any capacity in the UK, so not just vets, vet nurses and students. We used the method of reflexive thematic analysis to qualitatively analyse the free text data that we obtained from the questionnaire. The wide diversity of our project team, both in terms of our ethnicity and our experiencing and wide-ranging roles throughout the veterinary sector, was essential for understanding and interpreting the survey data. Our qualitative data analysis has been led and conducted by Dr. Naomi King, a psychologist and postdoctoral researcher from Oxford Brookes University. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to acknowledge our whole team here, who have been really central to the success of this project. So we had 265 respondents to our main survey, with an additional 26 respondents to our pilots. The majority of these were vets and vet students, but also included a wide range of roles such as vet nurses, academics, receptionists, practice managers and other support staff. With regards to ethnicity, most respondents were either from Asian or mixed ethnic backgrounds, and we had a small number of Black participants and those of other ethnicities. The in-depth qualitative analysis part of our study focused on responses to 2 open text questions which explored racist incidents and their impact in a subset of participants. And the aim of this was to advance understanding of the psychological effects of racism on BAME people in the veterinary sector, including the subtle and ambiguous forms of racism that often go unnoticed and unchallenged. In our survey, we really emphasised that we're keen to hear about all types of incidents of racism that the participants experienced, however big or small. So thematic analysis of the data generated 3 main themes, with a 4th theme of identity conflict running throughout these. I'm now going to pass over to Phoebe, who's going to describe these findings in a bit more detail.
Thank you, Victoria. So the 3 themes that we came up with were the alienation and insecurity, homogenization and inferiorization, and disappointment and futility. In our first theme, alienation and insecurity, many participants described how they experienced a sense of exclusion and alienation in the veterinary sector. A lot of participants stated white people, including clients, colleagues, managers, student placement hosts, student peers, and lecturers, often indicated that they perceived the participants as different, strange, and foreign. Some participants recounted incidents of blatant rejection, but most described more subtle ways in which they were othered. One participant, for example, wrote, "On work experience, the vet I was shadowing at the time would ask me questions like, 'Are you integrated into society yet?' And 'What do you eat?' I'm a British citizen who was born in the UK, and so were my parents, so I found this particularly confusing. I would reply, 'I eat the same kind of foods as everyone else.' But the vet would continue to ask questions like, 'No, but what do you have for dinner?' It made me feel quite upset." Racist incidences made the participants feel isolated and alone, like an outsider who was out of place and not welcome in the profession. Some people began to feel insecure in their identities, as they realised there was a large gap between their own perceptions of themselves, for example, being British, and other people's perceptions of them, for example, being foreigners and outsiders. One participant wrote, "I was made to feel different and became blindingly aware of how different I am perceived as. I find this difficult as I was born in the UK and see myself as British." Another participant stated, "Over time, it has made me feel very insecure in my identity and made me feel like that I don't belong. I don't see the profession ever feeling like somewhere that I belong. I will always be an outsider." We've gone through some of these quotes, and there will be other quotes coming through as well. And I think the big thing I really want everyone to sort of understand is, how does that make the person that is being told to feel? And I think it's more about the impact rather than the intent. So a lot of people say, well, if the intent is good, then actually there's no problem. And that's I use a lot of justification for racism. But remember, it doesn't really matter about the intent, it's more about the impact. And that's, I think, what the powerful thing about this whole study is. So in our second theme, homogenization and inferiorization, although white people tended to see the participants as different from themselves, they also tended to see them as very similar to other BAME people. This made the participants feel objectified and de-individualized. They were no longer unique, distinctive individuals. White people often referred to them by their presumed ethnicity, which was often incorrect, and sometimes mixed them up with other BAME colleagues. One participant wrote, "I've often been referred to as the Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Asian vet, girl, lady." Another participant wrote, "My Black colleague and I have totally different names. We look different. We work in different locations and have 2 different job roles. For some reason, when I started, a couple of people would mix us up. The mix-up even came to a point where my managing director messaged my other Black colleague instead of me." In addition, participants reported how white people frequently saw them through the lens of a negative racial stereotype. This made them feel inferior and inadequate, damaging their self-esteem, self-confidence, and self-respect. Another participant wrote, "There are comments from vets and nurses implying ethnicity impacts knowledge or skills. Clients stating refusal to be treated by a person of color. Clients correlating skill level with ethnicity. It's like taking your car to a bad mechanic, for example." Another stated, "There are comments from vets and nurses implying ethnicity impacts knowledge or skills. Clients stating refusal to be treated." I think overall, some of the experience have made me feel embarrassed, sad, emotional, helpless, less than, you name it, feeling like you're small or the inferior to others. A really big part of this theme can be related to the terms such as BAME and people of color. And these are troublesome terms because, again, it groups a large diversity of ethnicities into one group. So again, a British Asian Indian is very different from a British Asian Sri Lankan or a British Asian Pakistani. And so British Asian or person of color puts them all into one group. So the other problem with terms like BAME, people of color, is it centers whiteness and makes everyone different. And I think that takes the individualization away from people. So again, it's another theme that was coming out. In the third theme, disappointment and futility, racist incidences also left many participants feeling disappointed, disheartened, and dispirited. They experienced lower satisfaction and fulfillment in their work or studies, and no longer felt their careers to be meaningful or rewarding. One participant wrote, "Job satisfaction worsens when I learn that my colleagues, nurses or vets, are unaware of the impact of their words and do not understand what constitutes racism. For example, the use of the word gollywog, even when it's not used to describe a specific person. The judgment placed on someone due to ethnicity creates an unpleasant atmosphere which impacts job satisfaction." Racism was often linked to a sense of futility and pointlessness as participants questioned the value of their careers and were skeptical as to whether racism could be overcome. Several described how incidences have created or exacerbated mental health problems, including chronic stress, depression, burnout, imposter syndrome, and suicide ideation. One participant wrote, "Fighting racism drains a lot of energy and at times it overwhelms me. The worst part is that there's no end to it and I suffer from depression. This is what racism has done to me. It's made me strong as a fighter, but it shreds me from within. And whilst I have achieved high, I overcame obstacles and barriers. It has weakened my mind, drained my energy, and I live in a constant battle with racism and depression." When we talk about inclusion, is this inclusion? When we talk about retention and good workplaces, with these incidences, does that constitute a good workplace environment? The theme of identity conflict ran through all the above themes. Participants' own sense of identity, for example, being a British citizen, a good vet, a competent person, clashed with white people's perceptions of them being, for example, a foreigner, unsuitable for veterinary profession, or an inferior person. This caused internal conflict. Another participant wrote, "I had never thought that I'd be assumed to be non-British by a stranger until 2 vets separately indicated they thought otherwise. It just felt like my identity, which is British, was overlooked, ignored, and removed. For the first time, it made me consider how others saw me, and I felt very strange about it. It occupied my thoughts a lot, and I had many assumptions about people were making about me when they met me. Another participant wrote, each racist incident has an impact. Sometimes it feels like a little sting. Other times it feels like a ton of bricks has landed on you. There's a cumulative effect that changes a view of yourself and where you see yourself in society, how worthy you are of a place in this world. So we have so many different examples, experiences that were shared. And I think moving forward, we need to learn, and this needs to be a lesson for the sector. Victoria stated earlier that 55% of the profession weren't very concerned about diversity, and 44 were not very concerned about discrimination. This racism is real and present. Okay, it's not an individual case, but it's actually more widespread than that. The survey gathered voices from a huge number of ethnic and minority people. The question should not be whether racism exists, and that wasn't our intention. That was never a question. How does it make people, and how does it impact people? The current study has demonstrated the negative impact of racism on people's well-being within and beyond their workplace. For leadership, for the profession to change, we do need leadership. We do need to take responsibility for our own actions and for other people's actions and for our sector actions. And support is needed from allies and from people within. Just because it doesn't impact you personally doesn't mean you can make a real change. And that's what's required in our profession. Another thing about the sector is, I don't know, I'm passionate about the veterinary sector, but I'm also passionate about cricket. And I think recently we've had, you know, the recent revelations in cricket, which I think were very, very powerful. And a lot of lessons can be learned from what's happening in cricket in our sector. And for people who aren't aware, Azim Rafiq had struggled with racism throughout his career. He'd left the cricket because of racism, and only now he's been able to speak about it. And I think there's a couple of really important quotes that actually are very similar to what we're talking about here. And I want to sort of talk about them. Lord Kamlesh, who's now been brought in at Yorkshire Cricket to help change, has said a few things that I think is really meaningful. The aim of speaking out is to provoke real change. The courage to speak up, the people who had the courage to speak up should be praised. And nobody should underestimate how difficult it is to relive these things when we share their experiences. We must now stand together and say enough is enough. And we must hope that the courage of the participants should lead to real change. And the voices of the people that spoke in our survey, I think, is a real testament to their courage and their passion to help support our society and our sector to create that. So I want to end by acknowledging, you know, the RCVS MMI Sarah Brown Mental Health Research Grant, who generously funded this research. And without them, you know, this wouldn't have even happened. It's so difficult to coordinate and bring this about. And I think with their generosity, I think we've done something that's which is pivotal, which is a game changer and totally unique for our profession, but we need it. So, you know, we're very grateful for that. We are very, very grateful for the participants of the Race Together Veterinary Survey 2021. The sheer breadth of people that took part, the numbers of people that took part, the feedback that the people that took part, and again, like Lord Kamlesh said, you know, the courage of these people to share what they shared with us, I think is so powerful. And I hope that we can do it justice and create real change. And I think we owe it to the people that did support the survey. I also want to thank the organisations and institutions that disseminated the Race Together Veterinary Survey. Again, you know, without them, you know, people wouldn't have been aware of what we're doing and supported what we're doing. And you know, there was plenty more organisations that we couldn't put onto that. But we will, when we disseminate it further, we will share that those organisations. And again, we want to work with these organisations and institutions in trying to create real change with what the feedback we found. And before I end, I want to thank everyone for listening. This is only the first two objectives of our study. And again, we are going to produce more. And we did ask participants about how do we create the change? What would you like to see? Breaking down the barriers. And we want to be able to share that with the rest of the profession once we've spent time analysing that and putting that into a format that's useful. So thank you, everyone.